Thank you.
Whenever you.
So I was prepared for 15 minutes, as you had sent the instructions. I'll try to make it 10, 11. I hope. So you can see the title of my presentation here, Digitization Rush, the claiming of new territories in the digital space. So a few words about the title. I explore digitization rush as a complex phenomenon, which I look into a specific period, a competitive race-like period whereby various stakeholders aspire to extract the value of digitized resources and ultimately gain significant competitive advantage, that's the competition law part, in novel fronts, mainly machine learning and AI, artificial intelligence. So to clarify, I use the term digitization as the process required to convert print, tangible print, to digitized form, representation of content, basically. So my main starting point has been the digitization of books. That's why you're looking at a scanner in my first slide, basically the representation of existing old content on print form into a digitized version. And indeed, my title, Digitization Rush, comes from the analogy with the gold rush, historical period. As I look at new claims over valuable resources, as gold was back then, which indeed are charting new territories, as we went back then from the east to the west. So the old gold miner to the new gold miner, let's say, from the digital era. The working paper that I will present here has a tripart subtitle, which outlines both the presentation here and the working paper. First, I'm discussing book digitization efforts across the two sides of the Atlantic. I'm going to speak about the Google Books case in particular, also in view of the litigation. And the third, the more normative part, will turn into the new frontiers for competition. So let's start with the first part, book digitization efforts, besides the Google Books, which will be part of the second part. I look at a certain period where basically a lot of initiatives, both at from the private side and also from national authorities, a lot of book digitization initiatives started. The period has been also characterized as a race to the self. What you see here are the stacks of the New York Public Library and various national digital library initiatives in France, in Germany, in Norway. Norway famously digitized every book that it has ever been written in Norwegian. Europeana is the aggregator of digital content in Europe. That's an initiative that is very much linked to the European Commission. I mentioned here Hathitrust. Hathitrust is a consortium of libraries that started in the US, which involves the main partners that Google had in its digitization project. And I'm going to discuss the Google digitization project in the second part of the presentation. And of course the DPLA, that's the Digital Public Library of America. This is an initiative that started in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the Berkman Center, and that got autonomized afterwards and is now based in the Boston Public Library, which again was an initiative to sort of overcome the monopoly that Google tried to have with its digitization project. I actually I have presented this paper at Ascola a few days ago, and there the focus has been on nationalism this year in the conference. So I did focus on the French example from the examples that I already give, which is the Bibliothèque Nationale de France and Gallica, the French digital version of the National Library of France, which interestingly was not part of the Google Books project. So the director of the National Library of France refused to give to Google the books. Instead, they have their own digital library, which started much earlier than Google in 1988. When François Mitterrand asked for a library for the new genre, that's when they started thinking about it. And finally, in 1998, already had Gallica Online. So Jean-Noël Genani, who's the director of BNF, famously rejected Google's proposal to digitize the works of the BNF, writing an article in Le Monde saying that Google's dominance in the digitization business could result in a triumph of the Anglo-Saxon culture and the defeat of Europe. So very much as dramatic as French nationalism perhaps could be. So how about Google? The Google Books case started in 2004 with the announcement of the company, the announcement of two projects by the company in the Frankfurt Book Fair. One is a library project, and the other one is a partner program. So they partnered with initially with the 5 big libraries in the States and in the UK: Harvard, Stanford, Michigan, Oxford University, and the New York Public Library, and a few in the beginning, few publishers. There are more that were added to the project. They scanned over 25 million books, so this is the biggest digitization project so far. They were sued in 2005, the year after the project was announced, by the Authors Guild. That's the Authors Association, one Authors Association in the States, which led to a very long litigation that we see here, started in 2005 and finished in 2015. The reference here that this is a big case. This is a very big case for IP law. So I used this phrase again, taken from a presentation at Ascola. Tim Wu writes about big cases now in competition law, and he claims that we need to go back to the main big cases from the 70s and how where authorities were actually not afraid of breaking down trusts. So this is, I think, the equivalent of a big case in IP. Interestingly, of course, it has a huge competition law implication for so long as the Google Book settlement was still at the table. So in order to understand a little bit how this case proceeded, in 2005, Authors Guild sued Google with a specific procedure in the United States, which is called class action. The class action procedure allows for negotiations and settlements. So the parties filed the Google Book settlement agreement in 2005, immediately in 2008, which has been discussed, was then discussed for many years, and twice rejected by the court up until 2011, as you see here in the slide. Now, in 2013, the Google case continued as a simple IP case. So basically, the only claim on the table was the fact that Google infringed the copyright of right holders by scanning without asking permission. On the basis of the fair use exception, Google was found not guilty. The same was repeated in the appellate decision in 2015. And finally, despite the fact that the Authors Guild appealed also to the Supreme Court, the case was rejected. The Supreme Court did not grant certiorari. And it finished as a big triumph for the company. Now, why do we care that it's a big case? It's not a big competition law case, but it's a big IP case with huge implications for competition law, given the fact that the settlement was never passed, and only the IP questions were left on the table. And why is that important? So Google's competitors, as you see on the slide, Yahoo, Microsoft, Amazon, the Internet Archive, which is another internet library, had all complained that Google and the publishers indeed engaged in horizontal price fixing, and they would effectively, if the Google Book settlement was to pass, they would effectively have a distribution monopoly on books. So this didn't pass, and Google was allowed to keep all the digitized corpus, but only for non-display uses. So it could not display the books that it scanned when they were still under copyright. Therefore, it cannot compete players like Amazon. It cannot create a huge online bookstore. So in theory, the competition law issue was resolved. Well, not so much. Indeed, the United States Department of Justice intervened in that case, and it had asked for a mechanism by which Google's competitors can gain a comparable access to the digitized corpus if the settlement was to go forward. The settlement did not go forward, and finally we have Google owning all the digital corpus that it digitized. Now, the reason why I revisit this case, and I think it's problematic from a competition law perspective, is not for the display uses of the book, so not for the chance that Google could have in competing players like Amazon, but for non-display uses of books, which brings me to my third part, which is new frontiers for competition. Why should we care about non-display uses of the book? And that's AI, basically. So this is, I'm quoting here a software engineer from Google. The very worst search algorithm at 10 million words is better than the very best algorithm in 1 million words. In order for AI to work, of course, the algorithm is quite important, but also the kind of data that we put in the machine are utmost important for what kind of data comes out of the machine. The famous phrase, garbage in, garbage out, or gold in, gold out. So the player, in our case Google, that has a very valuable digitized resource in its control will necessarily not be, it won't be easy to compete this player in terms of AI outcomes. Yes, perfect. I managed to well, this is basically the gist of it, and we can talk more about ways that in which we can retroactively fix the outcome that the Google Books case resulted in. And with that, I thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you.